In this video, we're going to discuss sketching positive quadratic graphs. So for our example, we're going to look at y equals squared 6x plus 5. Now, to be able to sketch this graph, we need to know three things. The first is the graph's roots. Now, we can get these in one of two ways. We can either factorize if the quadratic factorizes, or we can use the quadratic formula. And the next thing we need is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So it's going to be the y-intercept. We're going to get that straight from our equation here. The third thing we need is the turning points. Now, the way we're going to get this is by using completing the square. Now, knowing these three things means that we can roughly sketch out what our graph will look like, which will help us with other things. So, let's start by looking at the roots. Now, this one I can see straight away that we can factorize this. So we're looking at pairs of numbers that multiply together to give you positive 5. So we've got two pairs, and we're looking for which pair adds together to give you positive 6. So it'll be our first pair up here. So we can factorize this as x plus 1, x plus 5. So our roots is when this thing equals 0. So it'll be x minus equals minus 1, or x equals minus 5. So that is where it's going to cross the x-axis. Now the next thing we're going to look at is the y-intercept. Well, straight away we get that the y-intercept is 5. So we'll just write that down just to remind us. And the last thing we're going to look at is the turning point. So we're going to get this by completing the square on our quadratic. We've got x squared plus 6x plus 5. The way we complete the square on this is look at the coefficient in front of the x term, which is 6. We're going to half that and put it in addition to the x inside our bracket. We've still got this plus 5 over here, but if you remember from when we complete the square, if we were to expand this bracket, we'd end up with an extra plus 3 squared. Now we don't want that, so we're going to have to get rid of that as well. We have x plus 3 all squared, minus 9 plus 5 is minus 4. Now, as this is a positive quadratic, as in we have got a positive coefficient for our x squared up here. This turning point is when it goes from going down to back up again. So our turning point is down here. So it's the lowest point of the graph. So we need to work out what makes this y the smallest. Now, the way that we make this y the smallest by making this bracket as small as possible. And the way that this bracket is as small as possible is by making this bracket 0. So what value of x makes this bracket 0? What do we have to add to positive 3 to get us 0? Well, x will have to be minus 3. Now, if this bracket is 0, what does y equal? Well, it equals 0, subtract 4. It's going to give us y equals minus 4. So our turning point is going to be minus 3, minus 4. So now we've got all that information, we can plot this graph. So our y-intercept is where it crosses y-axis, which was 5. Our roots, which is where it crosses the x-axis, they were minus 1, minus 5, minus 1, minus 5. And our turning point was minus 3, minus 4. That was minus 3, minus 4. So we can now join up our graph. Going through this minus 5, our turning point is there, going back up through and up through that plus 5 there. So we've sketched our quadratic. The three things we need to remember were our roots, so where it crosses the x-axis, the y-intercept, which is where it crosses the, roots is where it crosses the x-axis, y-intercept where it crosses the y-axis, and our turning point we got by completing the square.